Okay. Hello, everyone. Before I begin, um, just hold on for a second. Okay, let us begin. The title that has come for this episode is Archetypal Limits of the Hidden Mind. And what I mean by that is that there was a man by the name of Carl Jung, and he paid attention, he noticed something very unique in regards to how our minds occur, the minds of people, how they occur. One can say that from Carl Jung's view, there was something that the subconscious or behind the conscious view of the human being, there were certain common factors. Uh, let's see where we can begin. Carl Jung has this quote where he says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate your life and you will call it fate." There's this kind of viewpoint, ladies and gentlemen, that there has been evolution. This evolution eventually led to an individual subjective self-acknowledgement. This individual subjective self-acknowledgement, first people were kind of catching on to it in regards to, okay, this is the ego. Oh shit, everybody's an idea, a sense of self to themselves, like an abstract symbol to themselves. That is what the ideal view is in some way. Most people, if you notice, their ideology is alive to them through the sense of a story maintained by language. Language is moving in the minds of people like program, and the meaning of their lives is being extracted out of it. To be honest, the objective reality is extremely chaotic, not because it is changing, not because there are tidal waves, earthquakes, you know, um, you know, natural disasters, as we say, but also because the purpose of phenomena is innate. As if there was a man who looked in this whole world trying to find a sort of truth, a sort of meaning. And that being began to realize every meaning he had found, every treasure the objective world had given the individual, it is kept by the hands of your mind. Your sensory perception, which your objective reality is visible through, is all gravitating to a central point, which is your attention. You see, we had to break up the world into chunks to be able to speak about it. But now that we have spoken about it and we have evolved beyond individual means, now that there are people who are born, who are asking questions never asked before, we have to wonder about the structure of how human beings are identifying with the world they're entering. First thing is, you enter this world and you exit, okay? To stay in this world all the time, it's kind of like you've gone, uh, like you're a guest at a very like high class gathering, but it's like after the gathering is finished, you have stayed too long. It is a sort of living experience, this life, not a concept. But in 2019, there is so much ideal worship going on. Reality is, truth is still being sought in conceptualization and ideology. We come across to ourselves as a character in a story that only we truly see in that way. I remember when I was younger, I had a very an intense moment in this existence where I looked at this world and I was like, wow, there are 8 billion. At that time, there wasn't 8 billion, but, but I kind of looked at the moment and I was like, there's so many human beings, yet their eyes are each of their eyes, each of their, let's say, conscious attention is in an island of their own. And so we have to swim away from our own island to discover the worlds ahead. It's as if that moment where Christopher Columbus was a little kid and he wanted to leave the house and his mother's like, no, Christopher, you can't. You know? Christopher was like, Mom, you don't understand. You don't understand. I shouldn't be in the house right now, you know? Imagine a young little Christopher Columbus kid, you know? It's very interesting. The world turns our eyes, and in turn, our eyes turn the world. There is a relationship of an oscillation between a field of objective intelligence and subjective. The subjective our species hasn't cared for. It has cared for the surface of. We care for art, but not the silence it extends out from. We care for living life like human beings. We care for their lives, but at the same time, there is the void of empty space. There is that which we cannot see simply because it is too dark, and the poets will call it whatever, you know, whether it's matter too dark to see or energy too dark to see. There are always invisible forces working. However, the true challenge is how accurate the reception of the intelligence could be, you know? Most people are living in their own worlds, and sometimes when they can step out of their own worlds, that's the purpose of society, believe it or not. You are born in your own world, and then your civilization, this is what civilizations are meant for, what our species is a bit behind. The civilization has to pull you out of your inner reality to reveal to you the magnificence of the external collective reality. There was something in esoteric thought that I did not, in some sense, like. It was a sort of fantasy building over the unknown. You see, every person, right now, any sentence you say is, whether you like it or not, a comment on the unknown, because it is too unknown. Our knowledge stands firm in our own eyes, but beyond that, you know, an extraterrestrial could come down on this planet and we couldn't, like, imagine we have language issues, and it'll be like the worst first contact ever. You see, my whole attempt at sharing sentences like the title here is because I have seen a certain pattern that in this life we are under this impression that our attention can be on one truth, and that truth is everywhere. Yet we don't realize, what if truth is not something to find, it is something to create? What if truth is that moment where you as a human being had lived enough for yourself? You had lived enough. You had lived enough for yourself because you saw the whole world is here. And the value of the whole world, let me tell you, it surpasses every person on this planet. The value of our world, the value of the effort of civilization, you know, this is what the enlightened know and the unenlightened dream about. It is the strength to be. And when Shakespeare said to be or not to be, man, he had reached the edge of manifest reality. And it's a playful thing, you know. Most people think life ends in chaos because you're so strict about how the order is appears. This is Mr. Within's. I gotta say this before this episode perhaps is gonna kind of step out of the traditional way these talks are given. Um, I'm going to share my own approach to, in some sense, a multidimensional view of this world. You see, everybody can see, like, not everybody, I mean, but most people see the objective reality. They have no trouble. Right now, there's a laptop in front of me. You know, I don't need to go travel to, you know, India, you know, build a time machine and then travel to ancient India and ask, you know, the first yogis what the truth of, you know, this manifest world is, you know, this laptop is. The objective phenomena is, this is what Descartes also called, Rene Descartes, this French philosopher, caught on to, was the dualism of the mind and the body. That the body is in a way irrelevant to that which is observing the body. It's as if what is changing has nothing to do with what is observing that change. It's as if right now I see a slight breeze is moving the leaves of the tree in front of me in my yard. You know, I'm on my porch giving this stuff. So it's as if something outside of the sense of self is animating, has a sort of animate intelligence. And it has to do with how you choose the cause and effect of the world, of the state of the world to be. You see, it's as if I believe personally that the Abrahamic religions, they believe the cause of the universe was unknown and then its effect was known. Now, I find the secular society is the opposite. The cause is unknown, the effect is unknown, because science must hold true to its findings, because it is on a stage, you know. That is kind of like, right now this hasn't happened. Right now the world is opening its arms to science and using it as a mighty shield and spear to in some sense advance the civilization. But there will come a time where I believe scientists will be so judged by society that as much as they choose to remain rational, because irrational ideas are in their environment, they will eventually hit sort of error points in their logic. You know, you know, you can get a rose, but if you're standing beside a dumpster smelling it, you know, it's like good luck. So similarly, ideology fixates people into various loops and programs. There was a time the word program, it was too lifeless for me to use, you know. However, recently I've become fond of it because I have kind of interpreted the intersection of a genetical pattern of intelligence and a genetical pattern of intelligence that identifies itself with order. So its exploration is of chaos. So anytime it tries in this, you know, in this plane of existence, there will be karmic infinite an infinite karmic consequence. Think of it this way. Imagine, I mean, this might be a bit of a, you know, intense concept, but imagine like you were in outer space, okay, and let's say like we see an astronaut in a film, he drops like a screw, some object. And due to the vacuum nature of outer space, in some sense, the object just endlessly flies on in the pitch black abyss of space. It's literally a cause that is eternally moving in a certain way. Anyways, similarly, I find behind our eyes, we find also a sort of empty space. Not everybody can imagine things, but everybody can see how there is an emptiness of imagination. That emptiness is very profound. Sometimes you have to change gears of your value system in accordance to your natural direct experience rather than unnatural kind of system of belief that you have been conditioned in. It's kind of strange. It's as if every moment we're being sculpted by the hands of nature. Yet we also claim free will of the moment, ownership of the moment. And we reduce this ownership to the moment to a sort of conceptual notion, we are people on a rock in the middle of nowhere. When the caveman made fire, language was also a similar inspiration. We took words and made philosophies out of it. There's the story about Alexander the Great, that he realizes that he has conquered everything except time. That means Alexander the Great was like one of, you can say one of the few human beings in the history of our Earth that felt in his lifetime his free will had fully conquered. He reached the finish line of the free will's external manifestation to some degree at his time, you know? Now, he wonders time is going to conquer him, just like how he has devoured empires. Time will devour the emperor. And so the emperor wonders about eternity, wonders about continuity. And so Alexander Great looks at one of his right-hand men or somebody close to him and he says, "Find me the fountain of youth. Find me a moment where I can become eternal," pretty much. And so the assistants of Alexander the Great, those in some sense following him, they run around and they do some massive research project, you know. And eventually a person, one of them comes to Alexander the Great and says, "We have found it, my emperor," something like that. Now, what happens? Alexander the Great realizes that it's as if the people, his crew takes him to this place where it's a cliff, and it's this really tall cliff. Imagine like, you know, just vertical line up, and then suddenly in that vertical line up there is a cave, and Alexander the Great sees that cave and he starts climbing. He gets to the cave. He goes alone, Alexander the Great. He gets to the cave and he sees this incredible kind of natural fountain. he goes to drink from this fountain after his long climb, as if the way the location of the cave kind of made you had to drink water after you got to the top, you know. And so Alexander the Great's going there to drink, drink this water. And right before, you know, he drinks it, he hears a voice, a voice, a voice comes and says, "Don't do it." And Alexander the Great just stops for a second. He looks around, sees nothing, no one in the cave. He goes to, in some sense, drink from the fountain of truth again, fountain of youth again. And what happens is that, again, before he goes, he hears a voice, but this time his attention locks down on where the voice is coming from, and he sees it's a crow. This small crow is there, and he's like, "Don't drink it. Don't drink it." And Alexander the Great says, "Why?" And the crow looks at him and says, "Because me, I drank from it, and I became immortal, but I became an immortal crow." And that's a very powerful story, because its moral is any attempt towards uh, immortality would be a disruption of the evolution of life, the evolution of natural ways of being. You know, to most people, our cities and our whole civilization. When I say civilization, I'm talking about all infrastructure of humanity, regardless of their categorization of what country or whatever. Eventually, a sort of playful surrender will occur in the human being who's living too intensely in any situation. Imagine you're someone in the world right now, suffering has come to you. What will occur probably when suffering comes is personalities break. Now imagine the suffering comes and there is no personality. You realize there is no concept of suffering. You know, they said yogis in Vedanta, it says like some of the greatest yogis, mystics, they're like children. And I looked at that quote when I was younger and I'm like, makes sense. I had an ego back then. The reason is because language solidifies you in matter as a symbol. You are symbolically locked into manifestation, and maybe locked isn't the best word, but your attention has gone to an invisible self. When somebody comes and asks you, "Hey man, who are you? Tell me about yourself." Let's say it's a job interview. Whatever you're saying there, as if the artist has started drawing, and does it matter? Does it matter if it's how the artwork is drawn? I want to share something with you. Um, yeah, okay. So guys, check this out. I looked up the full quote. Carl Jung, he has this quote where he says, "Archetypes, in spite of their conservative nature, are not static, but in a continuous dramatic flux. Thus, the self as a monad or continuous unit would be dead. but it lives in as much as it splits and unites again. There is no energy without opposites. What he's saying here is that your personality is again oscillating between the known and the unknown, so your free will can continue with its language technology. So you see, it's as if um, it's as if we are all silent souls entering loud illusions, you know. And what that means is there you will have moments in this life where there is literally no attribute that you can identify with, and you will live in moments in this life where you become the world because your attention is on the collective. You see, if I say the word collective, people can have certain images arise in their mind, but if I told you a collective self, what thought arises? And to some mystics, the thought of rivers and streams all, you know, or I could say like drops or raindrops hitting, like falling into the ocean, that like the ocean is the collective self. In a world of our own creation, how far shall we break the walls of our own reality? In order for the mind, for the intelligence of the psychology of the human being to be something, it must acknowledge nothing. And you can even see this in animals, like, you know, inferior species, and also in young children, you know, young children who their behavior is still not modernized to civilities level, is because there's a subtle discrimination not being made in the internal structure. You start from knowledge, but you don't end in knowledge. You end in an non-dual experience. This non-dual experience was accessed in a moment, in an instant before any concept could breathe. The advanced communicator realizes they are the advanced communicator of the universal sector. You first are functioning as a personality, and this personality is maintained by an oscillation, a kind of your free will constantly seeing how it cannot be here and creating ways it wants to be here. Your interests actually, like sometimes, trust me, it's kind of like strange, but they say like before the person enters hell or before the person enters heaven, they see where they're going. They see how the world is moving in their eyes, and then you got to put down uh, the inner warrior to be able to look at the external world prior to any sort of emotional interpretation. So after, for now, in most of these talks, I speak about a sort of uh, obs- um, uh, self-inquiry where you're observing different dimensions of the self. And I say there's an objective dimension and a subjective dimension, but I limit it to that because beyond that, even though there may be interesting truths, we can't assimilate it. Literally, the species can't consume that much thought because the final thought is an acceleration of thought. It's as if the thoughts begin. Imagine right now, in one minute, you had like three thoughts come by, like after another or something. So now imagine the speed of these thoughts that are coming to you. They increase. It's as if concentration speeds up thought. Because the more still and silent your physical body is, the more you're a mental creature. Do you see? The Buddha sat down by a tree. After he was enlightened, his friend was like nearby. He's like, "Yo, Buddha, what happened, man? You've changed. Something's happened. And what is this? What is this enlightenment? You know?" And Buddha, his first answer to the truth was silence. And Buddha is just silent, just completely silent. And Ananda, to be honest, is like his friend. He goes and sits down, just the way Buddha is sitting. And then Ananda kind of taps into what the whole point of it is. Trust me, if you just sat still and silent for 20 minutes consciously, not unconsciously as if somebody's telling you to do something, like consciously where you're wondering about why the action is even needed. And after 20 minutes of stillness and silence, you're going to see your attention is going to shift in its texture, in its quality. And then as the attention goes on the breath, you begin, it's kind of strange, but your mind begins breathing in and out worlds. I feel what's missing in the species is an honest search. People are dishonestly trying to just meet their needs. They never wonder where what the value of their moment is because they do not dare to tackle a giant, which is the way that our ancestors lived that has designed the world today. You cannot change the past, but you can definitely enter a new future. It's kind of like you add a dimension rather than destroying something and rebuilding, you just build something new. And as you build something new, your attention begins eventually going to a natural mode of being where honesty activates your intelligence, dishonesty like it doesn't activate it. Because most likely you're told a moral story, whether from religion or some other story, other context, and you're going to see your mind will generate guilt because a character has to care for other characters in the world, or it will not exist as, as a person to itself. You know, this is the chaos of nature. This is why many people don't understand the value of civilization and how we must, as soon as possible, just ASAP reinvent it. Because it's the way it's headed is arrogant. It's blindness. Literally, it's like imagine you're driving, on the street, and slowly the car is just tilting towards the side of the road. That's a moment where you instantly have to just have your attention and clearly realign yourself, regardless of how many hours you've driven and how tired you are. So you see, the civilization is reaching a point where you first want to get out of the world, then you understand why you're in it, then when you see you're in the world, then you live with it and you serve it. And not serve it ideologically, like through some weird ritualistic way where I see certain spiritual circles going. Like, do you know what's going on? Like Mr. Within's view to all the metaphysical notions on this planet is that like 90% of them are storytelling, but the 10% of them are also stories, but these stories do not take the person towards an infinite desire. When somebody has an infinite desire, then your subconscious has opened the gates where rage is kind of waiting in the back. You open the context of your mind. You know, it's like, you'll see this. It's kind of like the fake niceness you see in society of people. This fake niceness is better, is much better than cruelty. But this fake niceness is not the top of the mountain. And one lifetime, I don't know how enough it is, but I just know that human beings should start sharing and communicating their inner realities fearlessly. Because it's as if, like, uh, when the world is thirsty, why keep the location of the resolution of the thirst, kind of, why keep it hidden? This is what I didn't understand about mysticism. It's hilarious. They are saying all these esoteric spiritual groups you see, for me, it's costume games. I'm telling you, it's costume games. And it's not, I'm not denying the value of the hidden institutions of this world. I'm just saying it's costume games. Because the nature of the mind is not an owner. You see, it's as if first the concept of the person wanted to own God. He created God with like clay and stuff, you know, like objects, a stick, a feather, or whatever. And there was a period of idol worship where people were felt this one thing was the source of everything. Okay, so sorry guys, I kind of got distracted for a second. And another second too after that. What I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to draw a picture. I'm trying to draw a picture that humanity is giving in because it is considering itself to have energy levels. It's considering itself to be an individual phenomena only. You're living in a world that, in one moment, its grandness is present, but at the same time, you're living in categories of your own conception. You know, it's as if, like, this is the challenge I find all therapists, all psychologists, especially, you even see Jordan Peterson speak. I don't know what kind of uh, person he is personally, but I'll tell you this: every time you speak to another human being, you are speaking to another world. And it's an ability. It's the true art of listening to the moment, not to any person, not to any ideology, not to any belief. You listen to your moment of being. You abide by it. It's strange, but it's super simple. There's this Sufi mystic poet named Rumi. He says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a place. When the soul sits on that grass, the world, oh my God, the, the world is too full to talk about. Sorry guys, the quote is out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there's a place. I will meet you there. And when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Once you go beyond the dualistic view of your moment, you center your reality through the experience of your present. And how your moment is happening varies and is different to how the moment of being of other beings happen, because their genetics and their energy levels are different. Walk in your world of truth until you are ready to see beyond it. After the games of heaven and hell, you will see a new earth that never had those dynamics. Your mind is eternally being temporary. You know, it's like the drop cannot that falls into an ocean cannot own the ocean. Regardless of how the mind is fragmented or filtered in some sense through archetypes, and these archetypes are shared by all or not in the collective unconscious, as Carl Jung suggests, regardless of the multidimensionality of the world, regardless of all the stories of the world, in the simplicity of the present moment, you just get an access to an honest glimpse at what is here. Your mind doesn't always have to follow kind of looping patterns of ideological kind of subjective engagement. It's kind of like going to a professor of a university and saying like the thoughts of that professor are empty. You look at nature and you see a great happening. Something is happening. And as your attention goes to it, you stop dividing yourself from the world you think is out there. And I find the ultimate kind of like the last refuge of the ego is wisdom. But beyond that refuge, there is just playfulness. A kind of you don't have a preferences on the you don't have a preference on the preferences that you naturally have. You know, the language simulation will end at some point. What that means is how the world is manifest in front of your eyes and how the world is manifest behind your eyes. Their relationship will break, not break, but change. Change in a way where the way you're being a moment becomes the whole moment. Kind of like the air in a balloon. Kind of when a balloon pops, the air returns. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. And as Carl Jung would say, the starry vault of heaven is in truth the open book of cosmic projection. Yeah. It's like we're in a world, but we're projecting meaning over it. It's fascinating. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and all.